October 17, 1959, 11:52 p.m. The back room of Lenox Lounge was thick with cigarette smoke and the kind of silence that comes before something terrible happens. Bumpy Johnson sat at his usual table, the one in the corner where he could see every entrance and exit, where no man could approach without being watched. His gray fedora rested on the white tablecloth next to an untouched glass of Hennessy. He was reading a letter from his daughter, smiling at something she'd written about her school play. Behind him, 8 feet away, stood a man named Roosevelt Big Slim Crawford. 6'5", 270 pounds of muscle and loyalty. Bumpy's personal bodyguard for 7 years. The man who'd taken 2 bullets for Bumpy in 1954 during the Genovese trouble. The man Bumpy trusted with his life, with his family's safety, with everything that mattered. Big Slim's right hand was inside his jacket, fingers wrapped around the grip of a modified .38 Special. His palm was sweating, his heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. In his left pocket was a photograph of his mother, 73 years old, sitting in a wheelchair in a Bronx nursing home that cost $400 a month. Money Big Slim didn't have. Money the Italians had promised to provide for the rest of her natural life if Big Slim did one thing. Walk up behind Bumpy Johnson and put a bullet in the back of his skull. $50,000. That was the contract, plus lifetime care for his mother, plus new identities for his 2 sisters, plus a house in California where nobody would ever find him. All he had to do was pull the trigger. Big Slim took a step forward. Then another. His hand tightened on the gun. Bumpy was still reading the letter, still smiling, completely vulnerable. 7 feet away now, then 6, then 5. Big Slim drew the weapon. The bartender saw it first. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened to shout a warning, but before any sound could escape his lips, Big Slim had already raised the gun, already aimed at the back of Bumpy's head, already squeezed the trigger. Click. Nothing. No explosion. No bullet. Just the mechanical sound of a firing pin striking an empty chamber. The click echoed through that silent room like a thunderclap. Every conversation stopped. Every glass froze halfway to every mouth. 47 people in that room turned to stare at Big Slim Crawford standing there with a useless gun pointed at the most dangerous man in Harlem. Bumpy didn't jump, didn't flinch, didn't even put down his daughter's letter. He folded it carefully, slid it into his jacket pocket, and picked up his glass of Hennessy. He took a slow sip, set the glass down, and then turned around in his chair. When his eyes met Big Slim's, there was no anger in them. No surprise, no fear. Just disappointment. The kind of disappointment a father shows when his son fails him. The kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than any knife. Bumpy spoke 6 words. 6 words that would echo through Harlem for the next 50 years. 6 words that would become legend. I taught you better than this. Big Slim's hand was shaking so badly the gun clattered to the floor. His legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees right there in the middle of Lenox Lounge, tears streaming down his face, surrounded by 47 witnesses who would tell this story until the day they died. But here's the thing nobody knew. Here's what the history books never recorded. Bumpy Johnson had known about this assassination attempt for 26 days. He'd orchestrated every single moment of what happened that night. And what he did in those 26 days didn't just save his life. It exposed a conspiracy that reached from the basement of a Bronx social club all the way to the highest levels of the Italian mob. It ended the 5 families' dreams of controlling Harlem forever. And it cemented Bumpy Johnson's reputation as the most untouchable man in New York City. This is that story. To understand what happened that night at Lenox Lounge, you have to understand what Harlem meant in 1959. You have to understand the war that had been raging beneath the surface for nearly 3 decades. And you have to understand why the Italian mob was so desperate to kill Bumpy Johnson that they were willing to pay $50,000 to make it happen. Harlem in 1959 was an empire. Not just a neighborhood, an empire. The numbers racket alone generated over $40 million a year. That's $400 million in today's money. Every barbershop, every bar, every grocery store, every corner in Harlem was a potential betting spot. People would wager nickels and dimes on 3-digit numbers, and if their number hit, they'd win 500 times their bet. For working folks making $50 a week, that nickel was hope. And Bumpy Johnson controlled the hope. But it wasn't just numbers. It was protection. It was influence. It was power. When a black business owner needed help with crooked cops, he called Bumpy. When a family couldn't pay their rent after the father lost his job, Bumpy's people showed up with an envelope. When some outside muscle tried to shake down a Harlem establishment, that muscle disappeared. Sometimes into hospitals, sometimes into the East River. Bumpy didn't just run Harlem. He protected it, and that made him more dangerous to the Italian mob than any other criminal in New York. Because Bumpy had something they could never have. Loyalty. Real loyalty. The kind you can't buy. The kind that comes from a community that sees you as their defender, not their exploiter. The five families had been trying to take Harlem for 30 years. Dutch Schultz tried in the 30s. Bumpy and Madam Street. Claire sent him running. Lucky Luciano tried to muscle in after Schultz died. Bumpy negotiated a deal that kept Harlem independent. The Genovese family made moves in the early 50s while Bumpy was in Alcatraz. When Bumpy came home, he took everything back. Every time the Italians thought they had Harlem in their grip, Bumpy Johnson pried their fingers off one by one. By 1959, they were done trying to negotiate. Done trying to intimidate. Done trying to outmaneuver. They wanted Bumpy Johnson dead. Not just dead, erased. They wanted to kill him in a way that would break Harlem's spirit, that would prove even the mighty Bumpy Johnson could be touched. And they found the perfect weapon. His own bodyguard. The approach happened on September 21, 1959. Big Slim Crawford was leaving his mother's nursing home in the Bronx. He'd just spent 3 hours with her, watching her struggle to remember his name, watching the nurses treat her like she was invisible, watching the decay that comes from being poor and old and black in 1959 America. The nursing home cost $400 a month. Big Slim made $600 working for Bumpy. After rent, food, and taking care of his 2 younger sisters, he had maybe $50 left over for his mother's care. The rest he borrowed. By September 1959, Big Slim owed $11,000 to various lenders. The interest was eating him alive. He was drowning, and nobody knew it. That's when the black Cadillac pulled up. The window rolled down. A face Big Slim didn't recognize looked out at him. A white face. Italian. Well-dressed. Calm. "Get in," the man said. "We need to talk about your mother." Big Slim's hand went to his waistband where he kept his piece. "Who are you? Someone who can solve all your problems? Or someone who can make them much, much worse? Your choice." Big Slim should have walked away. Should have gone straight to Bumpy and reported the contact. That's what a loyal soldier does. That's what Big Slim had always done for 7 years. But that day, standing outside that nursing home, thinking about his mother forgetting his name, thinking about the $11,000 he owed, thinking about his sisters who deserved better than the life he was giving them, Big Slim hesitated. And hesitation is the first step toward betrayal. He got in the car. The man's name was Vincent Torino. He was a captain in the Genovese family, specializing in what the Italians called special projects. Recruitment, corruption, turning loyal men into traitors. Vincent had a file on Big Slim. Knew about his mother, knew about his debts, knew about his sisters, knew exactly which buttons to push. "You're a good man, Roosevelt," Vincent said, using Big Slim's real name. "A good son, taking care of your mother even when she doesn't remember you. That takes character." Big Slim said nothing, just stared straight ahead. "Here's your situation. You owe $11,000. Your mother's care costs $400 a month. Your sisters need things you can't provide. And every month, you fall further behind. Eventually, the lenders are going to come for you. And when they do, what happens to your mother? What happens to your sisters? What do you want?" Big Slim's voice was flat. $50,000, cash, plus we pay for your mother's care for the rest of her life. Plus we relocate your sisters to California. New names, new lives, safe, protected. In exchange for what? 1 bullet, 1 moment. You walk into wherever Bumpy Johnson is vulnerable. You put a gun to his head. You pull the trigger, and then you disappear. We have a car waiting. New identity already prepared. By morning, Roosevelt Crawford doesn't exist anymore. Big Slim's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to kill the man I've protected for 7 years. I'm asking you to choose. Your loyalty to Bumpy Johnson or your family. Because right now, you can't have both. Eventually, your debts are going to destroy you. Eventually, your mother is going to die in that nursing home wondering why her son stopped coming. Eventually, your sisters are going to end up in situations no brother wants to imagine. Or you can end all of that. One bullet, 1 second, and everyone you love is safe forever. Big Slim was quiet for a long time. The Cadillac drove through the Bronx, past tenements and factories, past the kind of poverty that grinds hope into dust. Finally, Big Slim spoke. I need time to think. Of course. Vincent handed him a card with a phone number. You have 1 week. Call this number when you decide. But Roosevelt, don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't last forever. Big Slim got out of the car at the corner of 135th and Lenox. He stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes after the Cadillac drove away. Then he walked to Bumpy Johnson's office to report for his evening shift. He didn't say a word about the meeting. That was his first lie. The beginning of the end. What Big Slim didn't know, what Vincent Torino didn't know, was that Bumpy Johnson had eyes everywhere. Not just in Harlem, everywhere. A parking attendant at the nursing home named Jerome Williams had noticed the black Cadillac circling the block 3 times before Big Slim came out. He'd written down the license plate out of habit. When he saw Big Slim get in, he knew something was wrong. Big Slim never got into cars he didn't recognize. Never. Jerome made a phone call. That phone call went to a woman named Dorothy Banks, who ran a beauty salon on 125th Street. Dorothy called a numbers runner named Clarence, who passed the message to Illinois Gordon. Illinois Gordon was Bumpy's right hand. His oldest friend. The only man in Harlem who could walk into Bumpy's office without knocking. When Illinois heard what Jerome had seen, he felt his blood go cold. By 9 p.m. that night, Bumpy had the license plate. By midnight, he knew the car was registered to a Genovese front company. By 3 a.m., he had the name Vincent Torino. And by sunrise, Bumpy Johnson understood exactly what was happening. The Italians were trying to turn his bodyguard. His most trusted protector. The man who stood behind him every single day. Bumpy's first instinct was rage. The kind of cold, calculated rage that had made him legend. He could have Big Slim killed within the hour. One phone call and Roosevelt Crawford would disappear forever. Nobody would ever find the body. But Bumpy didn't make that call. Because Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a gangster. He was a chess player. And chess players don't react. They plan. Bumpy sat in his office all night, thinking, smoking, staring at the wall, running scenarios in his mind. By morning, he had a plan. Not just to survive the assassination attempt, but to use it, to turn the Italians' weapon against them. To send a message so powerful that the 5 families would never try anything like this again. The first step was surveillance. Bumpy needed to know everything about the Italian approach. What they were offering, what they were threatening, what Big Slim was thinking. He couldn't confront Big Slim directly. If Big Slim knew that Bumpy knew, he might panic. Might run to the Italians. Might do something unpredictable. Bumpy needed Big Slim to feel safe. Needed him to believe his betrayal was secret. So Bumpy watched. For 26 days, he watched Big Slim like a hawk watching a wounded rabbit. He noticed the way Big Slim's hands shook sometimes. The way he avoided eye contact during conversations. The way he lingered after meetings, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Bumpy saw a man struggling. A man caught between impossible choices. And part of Bumpy, the part that had known Big Slim for 7 years, felt sorry for him. But pity doesn't stop bullets. So Bumpy kept watching, and planning. Illinois Gordon ran the intelligence operation. Within a week, he knew everything. Vincent Torino had met with Big Slim twice more after the initial contact. Big Slim had resisted at first. Told Torino he needed more time. But Torino was patient. Torino was smart. On October 5th, Big Slim called the number on the card. His exact words, according to Illinois' source inside the phone company, I'm in. But I need the money up front. Half now, half after. Done, Torino had replied. The assassination was scheduled for October 17th. Bumpy had 12 days to prepare. The second step was the weapon. This was the most delicate part of the plan. Bumpy needed to let Big Slim go through with the assassination attempt. Needed him to pull that trigger in front of witnesses. But Bumpy obviously didn't want to actually get shot. The solution came from a man named Victor Reyes, a gunsmith in Brooklyn who'd been modifying weapons for Bumpy for nearly 20 years. Victor was an artist. He could make a gun that looked and felt exactly like the original but was completely inoperable. The firing pin would strike, but nothing would happen. Just a click. Bumpy explained what he needed. Victor didn't ask questions. Within 4 days, he delivered a modified .38 Special that was identical to Big Slim's service weapon. Same weight, same balance, same worn grip where Big Slim's fingers had rested for 7 years. The only difference was invisible. This gun would never fire a bullet. The third step was the swap. Bumpy needed to get into Big Slim's apartment and replace his real gun with the dummy. This required perfect timing. Big Slim was cautious, never left his weapon unattended, slept with it under his pillow, took it everywhere. But Bumpy found an opening. On October 12th, he sent Big Slim on an errand. A pickup from a contact in Jersey City. The kind of errand that would take all day. While Big Slim was gone, Illinois Gordon entered his apartment using a key they'd copied weeks earlier. He found the .38 in a drawer next to Big Slim's bed. Wrapped in a cloth, loaded, ready, Illinois made the swap carefully. Put the real gun in his pocket. Left Victor's dummy in its place. Then he wiped down everything he'd touched and left the apartment exactly as he'd found it. Big Slim came home that night. Checked his weapon like he always did. Noticed nothing. The dummy felt right, looked right. He had no idea his assassination tool was now a prop. The fourth step was witnesses. This was crucial. Bumpy didn't just want to survive the attempt. He wanted everyone to see it. He wanted 40, 50, maybe 100 people to watch Big Slim pull that trigger and watch nothing happen. He wanted the story to spread through Harlem like wildfire. He wanted every would-be traitor to know that you can't kill Bumpy Johnson because Bumpy Johnson knows everything before you do. So Bumpy arranged for a Friday night at Lenox Lounge. He made sure the right people would be there. Street soldiers, numbers runners, policy bankers, people who talked, people who would carry the story to every corner of Harlem before sunrise. He even made sure a few neutral parties were present. People connected to other organizations who would carry the story beyond Harlem into Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. He wanted the Italians to hear about this. Wanted them to understand exactly how badly their plan had failed. The fifth step was the message. What would Bumpy say when Big Slim pulled the trigger and nothing happened? What words would he use to cement this moment in legend? Bumpy thought about this for days. He could rage, could threaten, could make Big Slim beg for his life in front of everyone. But that wasn't Bumpy's style. Bumpy had always understood something that most men in his position never learned. Quiet power is more terrifying than loud power. A whisper can echo louder than a scream. So Bumpy settled on 6 words. I taught you better than this. That was it. No threats, no violence, just disappointment. The kind of disappointment that would haunt Big Slim for the rest of his life. The kind that would make everyone in that room understand exactly what they were witnessing. Not an execution, a lesson. October 17, 1959. The night arrived. Lenox Lounge was packed. The jazz quartet was playing something slow and smooth. Smoke hung in the air like fog. Bumpy sat at his corner table, reading his daughter's letter, waiting. He'd timed everything perfectly. He knew Big Slim was scheduled to make his move around midnight. Knew the Italians had a car waiting outside to whisk Big Slim away after the shooting. Knew that Vincent Torino himself was parked 2 blocks away, waiting for confirmation that Bumpy Johnson was finally dead. At 11:45 p.m., Big Slim excused himself to use the bathroom. When he came back, his face was pale. His hands were shaking. He'd spent 10 minutes in that bathroom staring at himself in the mirror, trying to find the courage to do what he'd agreed to do. Bumpy watched him in the reflection of the window. Saw the terror in his eyes. The doubt. Part of Bumpy hoped Big Slim would change his mind. Would walk over and confess everything. Would beg for forgiveness instead of going through with it. But men who've already taken the money rarely turn back. At 11:50 p.m., Big Slim moved into position. 8 feet behind Bumpy's chair. Hand inside his jacket, fingers on the gun. Bumpy didn't turn around, just kept reading his daughter's letter. Kept smiling at her words. Kept his breathing steady, his heart calm. He'd survived prison riots, knife fights, shootouts with Dutch Schultz's crew. He'd looked death in the face more times than he could count. This was nothing. At 11:52 p.m., Big Slim pulled the gun. The bartender saw it. His eyes went wide. Someone at a nearby table gasped. The music stopped mid-note. And in that frozen moment, that single second between life and death, Big Slim aimed at the back of Bumpy's head and squeezed the trigger. Click. The sound was impossibly loud in that silent room. A mechanical failure that echoed off the walls, the ceiling, the faces of 47 witnesses who would never forget what they saw. Big Slim pulled the trigger again. Click. Again. Click. 3 times he tried to kill Bumpy Johnson. 3 times the gun refused to fire. And Bumpy just sat there. Didn't move. Didn't flinch. Let the moment stretch out until the silence became unbearable. Then he folded his daughter's letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. Picked up his glass of Hennessy. Took a slow sip, set it down, and finally turned around. When his eyes met Big Slim's, the big man crumbled. Not physically at first, but you could see it in his face. The realization, the understanding. Bumpy had known all along, had sat there with his back turned, completely calm, because he knew the gun wouldn't fire. Because he'd arranged for the gun not to fire. Because Bumpy Johnson was always 3 moves ahead. I taught you better than this, Bumpy said quietly. Big Slim's gun clattered to the floor. His legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face, broken in front of everyone. The room remained frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were watching something they'd never seen before. A failed assassination transforming into a coronation. Bumpy proving once again why he was king. Bumpy stood up slowly. He was 53 years old now. Gray in his hair, lines on his face. But in that moment, he seemed 10 feet tall. He walked over to where Big Slim knelt and stood above him. Not touching him. Just looking down with those cold, empty eyes. You think I didn't know, Bumpy said. His voice was quiet but it carried through the entire room. You think I don't know everything that happens in my city. You think the Italians can send their man Torino to turn my own people without me knowing. Big Slim was sobbing now. Couldn't form words. Just shook his head and wept. I've known for 26 days, Bumpy continued. I've known every meeting you had with Torino. Every dollar they promised you. Every lie they told you about getting away clean. You think they were going to let you live. The moment you pulled that trigger, you became a loose end. They had a man in that car outside ready to put 2 bullets in your head before you made it to Jersey. Big Slim looked up, horror on his face. He hadn't considered that, hadn't realized the Italians would eliminate him too. Why would they let a traitor live? Why would they leave a witness who could testify about their involvement in killing Bumpy Johnson? They used you, Bumpy said. They found your weakness, your mother, your debts, and they used it to turn you into a weapon. And when that weapon was done firing, they were going to throw it away. My mother, Big Slim whispered. Please, Bumpy, my mother. She needs. Bumpy reached into his jacket. Big Slim flinched, expecting a gun, expecting death. Instead, Bumpy pulled out an envelope. He dropped it on the floor in front of Big Slim. Your mother's nursing home bills. All of them. Paid in full this morning. She's been moved to a better facility uptown. Private room. 24-hour care. Covered for the rest of her life. Big Slim stared at the envelope like it was a mirage. I don't understand. You're 11,000 in debts, Bumpy continued. Cleared. Every lender paid off. You owe nothing. Your sisters got checks this afternoon. Enough to get them through the next year. Get them started somewhere good. Big Slim was shaking his head, tears still flowing. Why would you do this after I did it? Because I needed to know, Bumpy said. I needed to see how far you would go. Whether you would pull that trigger or not. You had 26 days to come to me. 26 days to confess. 26 days to choose loyalty over fear. And every day you didn't, you told me exactly who you are. Bumpy paused. Let the words sink in. Now I know, he said. And now everyone in this room knows. He turned to address the crowd. All of you, You see what happened here tonight. The Italians tried to buy one of my people. They offered $50,000 to turn my own bodyguard into an assassin. They thought they could reach into Harlem and purchase Betrayal like it was a commodity. He let his gaze sweep across the room. They failed. Because I knew. Because I always know. Because in my city, loyalty isn't for sale. And anyone who thinks they can buy it, anyone who thinks they can turn my people against me, they're going to learn the same lesson Big Slim just learned. There's no secret I don't know. There's no plot I don't see coming. There's no bullet that can touch me. Bumpy picked up his glass of Hennessy from the table and raised it. To Harlem, to loyalty, and to the Italians, who need to understand that their dreams of controlling this neighborhood died tonight in this room. 47 voices rose in response. To Harlem, to loyalty. Bumpy drained his glass and set it down. Then he looked at Big Slim one last time. You've got 12 hours to leave New York. Take your mother somewhere warm. Florida maybe, somewhere she can breathe easier. Take your sisters with you. Start over. And Big Slim, never come back. Big Slim nodded, still crying, still broken, but alive. That was more than most traders could expect. He crawled to his feet, picked up the envelope of receipts and checks, and walked out of Lenox Lounge with everyone watching. He'd leave New York that night, move his mother to a care facility in Miami, take his sisters to start a new life in a new city. He'd never return to Harlem, never see Bumpy Johnson again, but he'd carry the weight of that night for the rest of his life. The click of that empty gun, the look in Bumpy's eyes, the words that echoed in his dreams. I taught you better than this. Vincent Torino was waiting in his car 2 blocks from Lenox Lounge. He had a radio communicator connected to a man inside the club, a waiter who'd been paid to confirm the moment Bumpy Johnson went down. But the confirmation never came. Instead, the waiter's voice crackled over the radio, panicked. It didn't work. The gun didn't fire. Johnson knew. He knew everything. Torino's blood went cold. He knew. Johnson turned the whole thing into a show. Made Crawford confess in front of everybody. Said he's known for 26 days. Said the car outside has a man ready to kill Crawford. Torino looked at the man sitting in his back seat. Tony Caruso, the triggerman who was supposed to eliminate Big Slim after the assassination. We need to move, Torino said. Now. They pulled away from the curb just as people started pouring out of Lenox Lounge. The story was already spreading. By morning, every criminal in New York would know what happened. By afternoon, the bosses of all 5 families would be demanding explanations. By nightfall, Vincent Torino would be answering some very uncomfortable questions. The emergency meeting was held the next day at a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. All 5 families sent representatives. Torino stood in the center of the room, sweating through his expensive suit, trying to explain how a $50,000 assassination had failed before a single bullet was fired. He knew for 26 days, Torino said. Somehow he found out about the approach. He let the whole thing play out just to humiliate us. Vito Genovese's underboss, a man named Anthony Strollo, slammed his fist on the table. 26 days. You were running this operation for a month and Johnson knew before you even started. Torino had no answer. Carlo Gambino, representing his family's interests, lit a cigar and spoke quietly. This is what we get for trying to fight Bumpy Johnson on his own territory. He knows Harlem like we know Brooklyn. Every bartender, every shoeshine boy, every parking attendant works for him. We can't move up there without him seeing us coming. So what? We just give up. Strollo demanded. Gambino shrugged. What's the alternative? We sent 12 men against him in the 40s. One walked out alive. We tried to muscle his territory in the 50s while he was in Alcatraz. He came home and took it all back in 6 months. Now we try to turn his own bodyguard and he knows about it before the deal is even done. He paused, let the smoke curl around his face. Some men you can't beat. Some territories aren't worth the blood. Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. It's belonged to him for 30 years. And it's going to belong to him until the day he dies. There's nothing we can do about it. The room was silent. Nobody wanted to admit it. But everybody knew Gambino was right. Tommy Lucchese spoke next. The decision was made. The 5 families agreed. Harlem was off limits. No more assassination attempts. No more approaches. No more trying to turn Bumpy's people. They'd focus on Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. Let Bumpy have his kingdom. The cost of trying to take it was too high. The story of Big Slim's betrayal spread through the underworld like wildfire. Within a week, every hustler from Boston to Baltimore knew what happened at Lenox Lounge. They told it in barbershops and pool halls, on street corners and in back rooms. Each telling added new details, new layers of legend. Some said Bumpy had known from the very first moment. Some said he'd actually been watching through a two-way mirror when Torino made the approach. Some said Bumpy had personally disabled the gun with his bare hands. The truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the message. You can't kill Bumpy Johnson. You can't buy his people. You can't even try without him knowing. And if you try anyway, he'll turn your own plan against you, humiliate you in front of everyone, and send you running with your tail between your legs. That message protected Bumpy for the rest of his life. Nobody ever tried to turn another one of his people. Nobody ever tried another inside job. The Italians stayed out of Harlem. And Bumpy Johnson remained the undisputed king until his death in 1968. 9 years of peace, 9 years of power, all because of one night. One click, one lesson that the underworld never forgot. Bumpy lived another 9 years after that night at Lenox Lounge. He died on July 7, 1968, not from a bullet, not from a knife, but from a heart attack. He was 62 years old. He collapsed at a restaurant in Harlem, surrounded by friends, still wearing his trademark fedora, still holding court like he always did. Over 3,000 people attended his funeral. Politicians, musicians, hustlers, regular folks who remembered how Bumpy had helped them when nobody else would. The church couldn't hold everyone. People lined the streets for blocks, paying their respects to the man who'd protected Harlem for 3 decades. And at the reception afterward, in a back room at Small's Paradise, the old-timers told stories. They talked about the night Bumpy faced down Dutch Schultz's crew in a cotton club basement. They talked about how he'd walked into Lucky Luciano's office and walked out with Harlem's independence. They talked about the Marcus Garvey Park incident and what Bumpy did to the men who hurt his family. But the story they told most often was the night Big Slim tried to shoot him. The night the gun didn't fire. The night Bumpy proved he was untouchable. I was there, Illinois Gordon said to a room full of listeners. Saw the whole thing. Bumpy didn't even flinch when that trigger clicked. Just sat there reading his daughter's letter like nothing happened. Then he turned around and looked at Big Slim with those eyes. Those cold, quiet eyes. And Big Slim just crumbled. Fell apart right there in front of everybody. Illinois shook his head. I've seen a lot of things in my life. But I never saw anything like that. A man so calm, so controlled, so far ahead of everybody else that he could sit there with a gun pointed at his head and know nothing was going to happen. That's why they called him the King of Harlem. Because he wasn't just tougher than everybody else. He was smarter. He saw things coming before they happened. He turned his enemies' plans into his own victories. And he did it all without raising his voice. Someone asked about Big Slim. Whatever happened to him? Illinois smiled sadly. Last I heard, he was in Florida, taking care of his mother until she passed. Then his sisters moved to California, and he went with them. Stayed out of the game entirely. Worked honest jobs. Died about 10 years ago, I think. Never came back to New York. Did Bumpy ever talk about him? Once, Illinois said. About a year before he died. We were sitting in his office, just the two of us, and he mentioned Big Slim out of nowhere. Said he hoped the man had found peace. Said he didn't blame him for taking the money. Said the Italians had found his weakness and exploited it. Any man could have made the same choice. I asked him why he didn't just kill Big Slim. Would have been easier. Would have sent a stronger message. Illinois paused, remembering. You know what Bumpy said. He said killing Big Slim would have proven nothing. Would have been just another gangster killing another gangster. But letting him live, letting him walk out of that lounge with his debts cleared and his mother taken care of, that proved something bigger. It proved that Bumpy Johnson wasn't just powerful. He was just. It proved that loyalty to Bumpy was rewarded and betrayal was punished, but the punishment fit the crime. Big Slim lost his place in Harlem. Lost his reputation. Lost his pride. But he kept his life because the Italians were the ones who turned him. They were the real enemy. Big Slim was just the weapon they tried to use. Illinois finished his drink. That's what made Bumpy different from everybody else, he said. He could have been cruel. Could have been vicious. He had the power to be anything he wanted. But he chose to be fair. He chose to be righteous. And that's why Harlem loved him. That's why we still love him. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then someone raised a glass. To Bumpy. To the king. And 50 voices responded. To Bumpy. To the king. Outside, Harlem was still alive. Still vibrant. Still carrying the legacy of the man who'd protected it for 30 years. The streets he'd walked. The corners he'd controlled. The people he'd helped. His name was everywhere. Whispered in conversations. Told in stories. Passed down from generation to generation. Because that's what legends do. They outlive the men who made them. They grow larger with each telling. They become more than history. They become myth. And Bumpy Johnson, the man who couldn't be killed, the man who knew everything before it happened, the man who turned his enemies' weapons into his own victories, had become the greatest myth Harlem ever knew. The click that echoed that night at Lenox Lounge, the sound of a firing pin striking an empty chamber, that click ended the Italian mob's dreams of controlling Harlem forever. It proved that Bumpy Johnson was untouchable. And it created a legend that would last long after the man himself was gone. That's the story they don't tell in the history books. The story of the night a $50,000 contract became worthless. The night a trusted bodyguard's betrayal backfired completely. The night Bumpy Johnson sat with his back turned to an assassin's gun and didn't even flinch because he already knew what was going to happen. He was always 3 moves ahead. Always. And that's why, even now, even 60 years later, people still tell his story. Still remember his name. Still raise their glasses in back rooms across Harlem and say those 5 words that have echoed through the decades. To Bumpy. To the king. Harlem remembers. Harlem always remembers.